Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to the latest episode of the Restaurant Growth Podcast by 7 Shifts. I'm your host, DJ, and on this episode, I had the chance to sit down with Meredith Sandland and Carl Osbourn, the authors of the brand new book, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. We got to chatting about how the book came about, some major takeaways from it, and even dove a bit into the current restaurant hiring situation. Meredith and Carl have a ton of industry experience and expertise in this book. Really helps kind of dissect a bit of how we got to where we are as an industry, and how to prepare for the future and make sure that we're doing what we can for what the consumer demand is wanting. You know, I really enjoyed recording this episode and I'm really excited to share it with you all. So without further ado, here's our conversation. Hey, Carl, Meredith, how are you today?
Great, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you both for coming on the show today. We're really excited to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. So before we begin, I'd love to have both of you just introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to write this book and why now. Meredith, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So I am Meredith Sandland, and I was the Chief Development Officer at Taco Bell, where I built about 1,000 Taco Bells.
Wow.
And yeah, quite a few. We've sold a lot of tacos. And halfway into the journey, I started to wonder, why are we building Taco Bells next to malls when no one's going to malls anymore? And, all those Taco Bells are still doing great. They're still really well located, but it really got me thinking. And when we then tried to enter into an urban environment, my head of architecture and I looked at each other and said, 40% of our sales are going out the door delivery. Shouldn't we just be in a commissary sending tacos out for delivery? So when I met the guys at Kitchen United, I was floored because they were building the thing that I wished existed as the person who would be the customer. So I went to Kitchen United, where I was the founding COO, and that's where I met Carl.
I hate having to follow Meredith's introduction, Dominic. It's never as impressive. I try, but I'll do my best. It's been an interesting journey. I spent most of my career in the convenience store industry, and I ran the in-store retail channel for Arco AM/PM, which, for those that don't know, is a 1,000-store network across the western states of the US. There, I was seeing the change in demands of the gas station customer. There were sandwiches in the back of gas stations that had a 20-day shelf life. And as a Brit, that is an abuse to the word sandwich, as far as I'm concerned. And for me, one of the kind of main successes I had was really revolutionizing our food approach in the kind of AM/PM offer. And really, it was just reflecting to me that food is becoming a very more important feature, I think, of people's lives today. And when I joined Meredith at Kitchen United, leading operations and helping the company there grow beyond one location and kind of write the manual, if you will, on how to run a ghost kitchen in that particular space, both Meredith and I were seeing the challenge that restaurants, not just small restaurants, the national chains as well that were working with us, were facing, some real tough decisions as to how to adapt their business model to working in a digital environment. And I think regardless of their size, as I say, we kind of came to the conclusion that the book really could help restaurant owners understand this digital disruption, understand why the challenge is significant. And by the way, the decision to write the book and the first few chapters that we did write were actually happening before the pandemic was in full force. And it still is very, very, it resonates, I think, today that it's even more important. But we thought it was important even before the pandemic.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I think, right in the beginning of the book, and it's something that hooked me reading it was, this isn't a book that's a reaction necessarily to the pandemic, but the way food is now and the way it's changing is a decades long kind of evolution from, you guys start from like the 50s until now, just kind of demonstrating how things are changing and how we got to where we are today. I just love that because it's a long game, right? And it's like, it's always going to be. So I like that you guys kind of start there and bring us to where we are.
Yeah, the restaurant industry is endlessly innovative, constantly changing. And that's one of the really fun things about being in the restaurant industry is that you always have the opportunity to try new things and to change up your menu and do all sorts of stuff. But I think the pace of change has accelerated for sure in the last year. And one of the reasons we go back to the 1950s and talk about it so much is because the drive-through, when it was created, required a completely different business model in order to be successful. When it first started, I'm sure people thought, oh, we'll just, append this on the side of our building and get a few extra sales. And if you look at where they've come to today, it's an entirely different business model. Everything about it is designed for that drive-through experience. And we think something similar is going to happen with delivery, where the restaurants who really get it, who really understand the digital relationship with their customer, who really understand off-premise consumption, are going to redesign the entire business model, everything from how they design products to how they market to their customers, all the way down to how they staff their restaurants. And that'll be totally different, designed specifically for this use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the way that things are changing is just like a rapid pace right now. And you guys cover so many things in the book, so many aspects of the industry that are changing. But one of the biggest things right now, everyone's talking about, I'm sure people are asking you about, people are asking us about, is the labor workforce and kind of the reaction to and the fallout of the pandemic on, the hiring crisis is really what it is right now. People are having trouble finding people to work in restaurants. People are not quite ready to go back. Roles are changing. There's really no such thing as just like straight up server anymore, straight up front of house, back of house. It's hybrid. So, I guess would love to know what you guys think of what's going on right now, how we got here also, and how, the digital restaurant can make that better and how technology can help.
Yeah, look, it's the restaurant industry is a tough environment to work in at the best of times. And I think right now, speaking to a CEO yesterday for a restaurant group, and he said he's never known it to be as difficult from a workforce perspective as it is today. It's all wrapped up in a number of factors, not just the pandemic. There's the fair, equitable pay debates. There's the rise of off-premise as well, quite honestly, Dominic. The fact that, and we feature this in the book, where we talk about the delivery service drivers taking tips away from the frontline staff. And I think what it all comes down to is restaurant employers are having to think more about their value proposition that they're offering to their staff. Those that have got a very defined sense of culture, those that have got a very clear value proposition that they can say, look, we want you to come in and not just serve a function, we want you to actually build a career and actually see your journey through with us. And there are some out there that are doing that, don't have anywhere near the same level of retention challenges that most in the industry are facing. And I think part of it is that they have connected to that potential candidate in an offline kind of sense, but also in an online sense. Mm-hmm. They're able to attract customers, they're able to attract employees through fantastic digital mechanisms, and then recruit them potentially through mechanisms such as video interviewing. And then once they're there, the trick is obviously to have a culture that plays it through and walks the talk that they perhaps were promised through the recruitment process.
Mm. Yeah, many of the things that we talk about with consumers in terms of a frictionless interaction and being able to have that digital relationship with your consumer also apply to your employees.
Yep.
If you make it hard for them to come work for you as they go through the recruiting funnel, or you make it hard for them to work for you on a day-to-day basis in terms of, how they get scheduled and which days they work and how that relates to other jobs they might have and how they can get time off or not and things. If you make that hard, you're going to see that in your turnover numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, to draw it back to, the consumer too, it's like the restaurants that are making you pick up the phone to order are probably not doing as well as the ones that let you do it online with apps, and make it convenient for you. So it's the same thing with employees. If you're, we at Seven Shifts talk a lot about scheduling. Of course, that's our thing. If you're making employees come in to look at the schedule on a piece of paper versus sending it to their phon when they're out doing whatever,
it seems so like obvious that of course that like an employee is a consumer, right? That person coming in and being a server also, goes to restaurants and grocery stores and other things. And if they're being exposed to all these amazingly frictionless ways of interacting with brands in their consumer life, and then they come to work and it's a piece of paper, you can see how they would be like, what? I'll go find some place that's easier to work.
Sure. And I think if you build on that, the variety that a consumer wants in their day-to-day life, whether that be through whatever retail places they actually choose to purchase from, that same variety is actually wanted by the workforce. And that's variety and flexibility in the shifts that they work in, potentially variety in the amount of places that they work. You know, the amount of people now working part-time work as opposed to full-time, I think is huge. And I think for that reason, people want that variety in their day-to-day kind of lifestyle at work and at home.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think maybe the way that restaurants went digital for their teams and their employees kind of took a backseat to the digital revolution for the consumer. And I think we're starting to see that catch up, and people are kind of kicking themselves for not getting there faster, because it's the restaurants that did kind of have the foresight that are not having trouble hiring, not having trouble retaining. And they're taking all of the great employees away and building great businesses with them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I wonder, in the process of writing this book, both of you have a tremendous experience in the industry. Going into it, were there things that you thought you had a really good understanding of? You're like, oh yeah, I know that, or, I feel like I get it. But through the research, through the process, it kind of got flipped on its head. You're like, oh, I had no idea.
I think for me, it was ghost kitchens. Absolutely. Having created the Kitchen United business model and Carl and I starting to scale it and getting the first few units open, that one to me seemed like the one we knew the most about. But as we started interviewing all these different models of ghost kitchens, we realized there's actually quite a bit of innovation out there. We're still very early in the ghost kitchen industry.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people experimenting with a lot of different ways to do it. And it was fascinating to talk to a bunch of different people who are in the ghost kitchen space and hear what their approach is.
Yeah, I would agree. I think ghost kitchens is a great answer. I think the one that we perhaps didn't know as much about, Dominic, would have been the maturity of markets chapter, where we explore what's going on in other countries around the world, where markets perhaps are a little bit more mature in their digital evolution. And in that, as we progress through in the book, we talk about the elephant in the room around profitability of off-premise and the challenge between marketplaces and first-party ordering, and the importance of just raising that subject early on in the book so that restaurants know that we're understanding all perspectives on this. And I think that is always a challenge, being able to understand that actually off-premise execution in a digital sense is still very early. And I think for that reason, there's still a journey for it to go on to get to a place where it's profitable. And Meredith wrote the delivery as the new drive-through chapter early on. And in many ways, it's in that chapter where we say it was exactly the same for drive-through in the early days, where it wasn't particularly profitable, but it does evolve to a place where actually the business has to adapt to what the consumer wants. And it's clear today that the consumer wants delivery.
Absolutely. And what ways are you seeing, successful restaurants adapt to delivery, and they're, the ones that are kind of first to finding that profitability there? What are the kind of the traits or examples of businesses that are doing it well?
I think first and foremost, it's a digital relationship with their customer. They understand that that's what customers value and that's what customers want, and they design their business around that, whether the customer is coming in and doing takeout, which I would call self-delivery, or they're getting a first-party order or a third-party order, however they might be interfacing in this world. The very first step is accepting consumers actually want this, and I need to find a way to have a relationship with them. So that is definitely first and foremost, the restaurants that are succeeding in this space have made that decision in a proactive way. And then I think the second one is starting to design their business around delivery. And here I think fast food restaurants have a bit of a head start because their food has always been eaten off premise, right? It's always gone out the drive-through window.
Yeah.
So the product design and the packaging were meant for the product to be taken away and eaten elsewhere. The way the business model works with the attachment rates of beverages, it took into account the fact that the food was going to be eaten elsewhere. For restaurants that are more dine-in heavy, it's a little bit more of an evolution because they might have to rethink, okay, this product is great when I plate it and it's beautiful, but it doesn't really work when I package it up in a box and send it out the door. So they have to rethink how that product is formulated or how it's packaged in order to get it out the door. They might also have to rethink their labor model and how they're staffing in order to fulfill some of these delivery orders. So here again, I think fast food has a little bit of a head start because almost all fast food restaurants have two lines, one for dine-in and one for drive-through.
Yep.
And so they are able to use those two lines flexibly to think about, how do I satisfy the customer who has placed an order ahead using a mobile device versus the customer who's right here in front of me. For kitchens that only have one production line, they can end up with all kinds of backups, where someone might be standing there waiting for their order and it's behind 10 orders that came through online. So figuring those things out all the way through every aspect of your business totally matters. But step one is saying, oh, this is happening. I need to have a digital relationship with my customer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I would agree with all of what Meredith just said. I would add we wrote the book, Dominic, for the independent small chain operator. We obviously would keep them very much front of mind here because, there's a lot going on, which is in very many ways leveling the playing field for that particular group.
Yeah.
But on the same end, it's incredibly overwhelming to be able to understand, well, where do I start on this journey? How do I understand which forms of technology to perhaps utilize? How do I start developing my own digital maturity in such a way that allows us to build a future for our business? And that, I think, is something which I'm hoping the book, through its examples, we interviewed over, I think it was 100 different executives, not just in the restaurant world, but also in the technology world, such as Jordan, your CEO.
Yeah.
And we were able to, through that, I think, say, there is a way, but you have to approach it in a certain kind of order. And if you do that, not only will you learn the capabilities to be digitally effective, you'll also find the ways to address the capacity challenges that I think Meredith was just touching on.
Yeah, absolutely. I just read of a restaurant a couple of days ago. I think I saw it on Instagram or LinkedIn somewhere. They were like, we are no longer taking takeout orders Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because we just don't have the capacity to do it. And it's heartbreaking because that can be such a significant profit driver for them, but maybe they're not quite there figuring out exactly how to do it, or they just don't have the wherewithal, the staff to make it happen.
Yeah, I think it's really a critical point. The phrase I've been using with a lot, Dominic, is we were once restricted by the amount of tables in the restaurant and the turn time of those tables. Yeah. And now you're restricted not by that, because your audience is 3 to 5 miles away from your restaurant. Now it's about how quickly can you get certain amounts of units and dishes through your kitchen. And so the process engineers, the operators that are thinking about the variety of not just your core brand, but potentially your virtual brands that you're actually trying to channel through your kitchen, they're the ones that ultimately are going to probably find the most success in the years to come. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think kind of the good thing about all of this and where we are now is the technology is there and it's available and it's accessible and it's the best it's ever been.
Yeah. That has been one of the most amazing things to me, leaving a big company, because there were a lot of pieces of technology that we built internally that only someone with the scale of Yum or Taco Bell could afford to build.
Yeah.
And now with the SaaSification of all of these tools, anyone can pay a monthly fee and get access to these amazing things that historically would have cost millions of dollars to build. It would have been completely prohibitive, right?
Yeah.
That is so cool that you don't have to be a big restaurant to have access to these really, truly amazing technological little bits and pieces that stitch your business together in a much more digital way.
Yeah, and I think the trick restaurant managers need to figure out is how do they utilize the cost efficiencies that come from that technology and then address the standard cost models that they have within their restaurant. So Meredith gave me the challenge when we were running the Ghost Kitchen business. Well, how can you run a scaled up Ghost Kitchen environment without having the layers of regional managers that you typically have in any multi-unit business? And you can do that through SaaSification. But you have to approach it from a kind of ground up approach and understand that you can't build an off-premise model using the mentality of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the great thing I think about the book too, is that all of that stuff is in there. And it's there for you to kind of take away and take back to your restaurant, and begin to compete with kind of the bigger fish in the pond and use that technology to your advantage and change your business model and just upend it in some cases. and find a way to build a new future-proof restaurant. Yeah, I mean, one of my next questions, and I think we kind of already answered it, was, what do you hope that restaurateurs take away from this book, ultimately at the end, and what do you hope it can bring for the independent restaurateur, other than maybe, is it like do you see it as a playbook to kind of build a digital restaurant?
Well, it's not a how-to book. We haven't suggested that it's a how-to book, but it certainly is a representation of the facets of what we think are happening for those that are succeeding in this space. Mm-hmm. So I think it will certainly whet the appetite for anyone that really wants to build their business model in this direction. And I'm hoping that anyone that reads it will actually look at it, read it, absorb it, and recognize the opportunity right now for restaurateurs is huge. It's incredibly exciting. And actually, all it takes is the right mindset and the right application of the principles that we raise in the book. And actually, the restaurant industry is in fantastic hands in the years to come. And we highlight some of the great players that are doing just that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that two takeaways I would love everyone to have. The first is that all of these changes start with the consumer. This is not being done to restaurants, right? It's not a bunch of VCs somewhere investing a bunch of money trying to upend the industry and make it different. Consumers want this stuff. And they want it for a whole host of reasons that we talk about in the book, but accepting and acknowledging that this is the direction that consumers are going, I think really helps restaurants then rally around, okay, what do I need to do in order to serve my consumer better, which is what hospitality is all about. And then the second thing I would say that I hope people take from it is that you don't succeed by just appending digital on the side of your business. And we had a lot of people while we were at Kitchen United who would say things like, oh, this delivery thing's just a fad. It's not going to last once the VC money goes away. I had people say to me during the pandemic, like, oh, sure, delivery's up because of COVID, but once it's over, people will go back to the way they used to do things. And I just don't believe that. That's not going to happen. And if you just sort of make the best of it and slap some digital on because you think that some people want it, or at least they want it in the interim, it's not going to work. You need to rethink your business model in light of all these digital tools.
Absolutely. I think the habits are set. It wasn't a 2-week thing like I think everyone thought it was at the beginning. It's almost 2 years now. But those habits are not going away anytime soon, especially with the current climate kind of things where we're reverting back a bit.
Absolutely. And the longer it goes on, the more consumers will become set in these new behaviors that they're developing.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of delivery, one of the, most intriguing parts reading the book, I was surprised. And the amount of dedication to this was extremely impressive. But Carl, I know you signed up to become a delivery driver to research for the book. What was that experience like?
It was great. It was fantastic. I think it's true with any operator, quite honestly, in whichever walk of life you're at, is to really experience part of the ecosystem. And there's no better way than to experience it as a delivery driver. We have a chapter in the book called "The Gig Worker is the New Server." And in many ways, the experience of dining in a restaurant is part of that kind of server-guest relationship where the food is presented, you build the rapport with the customer. And in an off-premise context, that is being given to a third-party person who's not wearing the restaurant's uniform, and they're going out, and some of them might just be dropping it on a doorstep. But the best delivery drivers out there recognize that they're an extension of the restaurant's brand for each and every package that they're delivering to a customer's front door. And I think the point of that particular chapter in the book, and the thing that resonated very strongly with me, Dominic, from the experience, is the importance of the restaurants recognizing that driver role and not to treat them as just a service provider that they're begrudgingly paying a fee for. I think the drivers themselves are playing a significant role in this overall ecosystem. And certainly what we found in the ghost kitchen environment is if you treat them right, then actually they're going to leave your restaurant in a much better frame of mind for when they actually end up in front of your guest door. And that probably was the main lesson I learned, because I can tell you, I went to a few restaurants and I didn't feel particularly welcome.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I love that chapter for that because people fail, I think, to recognize that the drivers are the ones that select. You say we have a delivery, and they say, "Oh, I'm going to go pick it up. I'm choosing to go pick it up from DJ's restaurant." And if you don't make that experience good for them, they're not going to. People are not going to. Yeah, and they're going to talk amongst themselves and they say, "Don't pick up from them. That's not worth it."
Absolutely. And it can either become a virtuous cycle or it can become a downward spiral, right?
Right.
If you are always fast and always pleasant and your customers give good tips, then the drivers want to come to you. And as they come to you, they'll be faster. As they're faster, like everything just gets better. Total. And the reverse happens as well, where if it's a negative experience, everything gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're a restaurant owner, independent owner, maybe take it for a spin, sign up, make a couple deliveries, see what it's like.
Chain employees too, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to do.
Absolutely. I think we're kind of getting towards the end of our time today. Don't want to give too much away. Want to leave some for people to buy the book and read and experience on their own. So for those that are interested, where can people get a copy?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Dominic. Well, people can today get their copy through our website, which is deliveringthedigitalrestaurant.com. And if they go to the website, so we've got a special coupon code for each of your listeners, Dominic, called 7 Shifts. Seems appropriate.
Excellent.
And for everyone using that, they'll get a 20% discount on the book. If they order it now, then they'll certainly be able to get a copy before the main Amazon launch, which is happening later this year. But hopefully your customers will find some interest in it. And
absolutely,
we'd love to hear from them as well. Hopefully the book does indeed set out what we tried to do.
Yeah, I absolutely think it does. And can folks find it on e-readers as well?
Yes, it's available as an ebook right now through Amazon, through Nook, through Apple, all of the kind of major places where you can get a digital book. And I'm in the midst of completing the audiobook as well. So very shortly, an audiobook for those of you that prefer that will be available too.
I know you doing the audiobook, you're reading it yourself?
There's something that Meredith likes about the British accent, I guess.
I know, he sounds so smart. It's incredible.
Very authoritative.
Yeah.
Although we're often having debates about how to pronounce certain words. So I apologize up front right now for people that think I pronounce things incorrectly.
Absolutely. So basically, you can find it anywhere that you prefer to read or listen. There's no excuse. Pick it up, get some amazing information. It's incredibly well researched, incredibly well written, covers so many topics. And, I think it's a must have for any independent restaurant owner, chain restaurant executive, or basically anybody in the industry that wants to kind of have, almost a guide to the future of what's happening.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, DJ. It's just
absolutely
helps us as authors every time we hear someone say, "Oh, I've read the book," no matter what they think of it. It's just incredible to know that your words are reaching another person.
Of course, absolutely. And we hope you guys take advantage. Listeners, take advantage. This is our first ever code for promo or anything like that. So we're excited about that. Again, on Amazon, on deliveringthedigitalrestaurant.com, use the code 7shifts, 20% off hardcover, which is coming. You can get the hardcover now, right?
You can get the hardcover, and that code will work on that website, deliveringthedigitalrestaurant.com.
But the hardcover won't be out on Amazon until October the 12th. So
absolutely.
If you order now, you'll be one of the first readers, which is
absolutely. I would hold up a copy, but I read it on my Kindle. So I don't know if my Kindle's here. But
that's okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it. And go out and get a copy. Delivering the Digital Restaurant, your roadmap to the future of food. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 7 Shifts Restaurant Management and Growth Podcast. For more great content, you can check out our blog at 7shifts.com/blog. You can also find us on every social media platform: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, at 7 Shifts. Thanks again.